So the research question that I chose after looking at the stimulus sources was, how does the existence of prevalent prejudices impact various minorities? So I will first begin with a historical background, talking about slavery, the LGBT movement, and Islamophobia. So in the article, Christianity is a Justification for Slavery, it stated that 184 years ago, 2 articles released were pertaining to the topic of Christianity and its relationship with slavery. The article said that both the Old and the New Testament stated that the slavery was permissible in the eyes of God and Jesus. As you can see from this cartoon, it was from an anti-abolitionist, pro-slavery cartoon drawn roughly in 1800. The significance of this is that people are drawing cartoons of the devil saying that slavery is a sin. However, Christians don't follow the word of the devil, they follow the word of God. Therefore, this normalizes this normalizes slavery in the eyes of Christians. Talking about the LGBT community and Islam, the gay and lesbian rights movement started on June 28, 1969, when a well-known gay bar was raided by police officers, fueled by nothing but prejudice, unjust prejudice. But what's so special about this incident is that the people in the club fought back against their oppressors and felt like it was finally time for them to stop being stomped on by these people. I can also talk about Islamophobia. Many people target Muslims and Islam as a whole as a terrorist religion based on factors from 9/11 and say that all Muslims are terrorists, and even though many instances like this are done by radical groups not actually linked to Islam. So what are some social impacts today and recently? Well, I'll be talking about the civil rights movement, police brutality, and stop and frisks. So as Martin Luther King Jr. said in his letter from Birmingham jail, he says, "We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." Here you can see Martin Luther King Jr., a man who is known for peaceful protests, is pushed back by officers during the 220-mile March Against Fear protest. This protest was meant to promote black voter registration and defy entrenched racism. Martin Luther King Jr. is a man who's known for his nonviolent protests, and yet although mildly, is pushed back violently by police officers. So many people of color today and recently have had to deal with police brutality and stop and frisks. One example is the Alabama protest, which happened in 1963. People who were demanding an end to segregation were viciously attacked, whether being beaten by police officers, mauled by police dogs, or sprayed with fire hoses. And today, people of color in New York City, one of the most progressive cities in the U.S., have to deal with stop and frisks. Now, what is a stop and frisk? A stop and frisk is where a police officer stops somebody that they deem suspicious on carrying whether a weapon or drugs, and they pat them down and send them on their way if they don't suspect that they have anything on them. Well, between the years of 2004 and 2012, 4.4 million people in New York City were stopped on stop and frisks. However, over 80% were people of color, whether that be Latin or African American. Now, how is that a coincidence? How can someone say that over 80% of people being stopped were people of color? How can that be a coincidence? As you can see from this infographic, as it says up here, blacks are almost 12 times as likely as whites to have force used while being stop or frisked by the New York City police. Over here it says number of cases of force during stop and frisk per 100 city residents. White people are at a low 0.3. Meanwhile, African American people are almost 4. Almost 4 in 100 people in New York City had force used on them while they were being stopped. So to answer my question I asked at the beginning, what is the impact of these unfair prejudices? It's oppression. So my first thought of a solution to solving this was that we should add more liberal lawmakers in the places of power. However, I thought this is not how the U.S. government works. You cannot just place somebody into a position of power without them being voted in. So my final solution, and the one that I came to think was the best, was that we should educate the populace as to why voting matters. Educating people as to why voting matters shows people that they have a choice on who is running the country. They are able to put these more liberal lawmakers into power, put people that will stop these prejudices from affecting minorities. A limitation for the solution is that people still have their right to not vote in local/big scale elections. You cannot force people to vote, and people still have that as their free will. The implications for the solution, however, is that more liberal-thinking people can vote lawmakers who will stand against prejudice. People can be voted in that will continue the work of Martin Luther King Jr. and others like them.
Okay, a couple of questions, Alec. The first one is, what information did you need that you weren't able to find or locate, and how did you go about trying to find that information?
It was very hard to find professional sources that stated different information I needed on my topic, because I was trying to base my paper around facts of these things happening against minorities and the prejudice against minorities. However, a lot of journalistic sources that I saw were mainly people stating their opinion on whether or not why these people should have the same rights as majorities.
So how did you go about trying to find that information?
I looked on more reputable sources, like I looked on opposing viewpoints and other reputable sources like it.
Your second question is, what might be the real-world implications or consequences, and they put in parentheses, influence on others' behaviors or decision-making processes of your findings, and then what are the implications to our community?
Can you speak that?
Yeah, I know it's long. First, let me do the first part, okay? So what might be the real-world implications or consequences, and they put in parentheses, influences on others' behavior or decision-making processes of your findings?
Educating people as to how these minorities are being treated and the unfairness of it may influence people to change their mind about these minorities, such as looking at the civil rights movement, seeing Martin Luther King being pushed violently by police officers. They can see pictures like that and see, oh, we're not going about this the right way. Maybe we should think about it from their perspective.
And then the second half of that, what are the implications to our community?
Again, it can go with my solution. If people are more educated as to why we should help these minorities out, people will be more, people might change to a more liberal thought process instead of the more conservative that you see that goes along with a lot of the hate against minorities.